Welcome to Web Development Lesson 3.5. Up to now, you've learned how to get information from the user using text inputs. But what happens when the information is numerical? So in this lesson, we're going to learn some basic arithmetic operations and a concept called string concatenation. So let's get to it. So a quick review of what we have. We have two text inputs with a button input with a plus sign and a span with an ID of output. So the goal of this particular program is for us to add two numbers and then display the answer, numerical information. So as always, we have to get the information from our text inputs. So let's create a variable. Let's let n1 equal to document get element by ID number 1. And notice the variables and the IDs don't have to match, but you do need to create a variable. It's just easier that way. And let's do this, number 2. Same idea. Number 2. And let's create one for our output. Okay, now that we have all the information in place, let's create a variable that is the result of us adding the two numbers together. So let's create let result equal to n1 plus n2, right? So the person's ideally going to enter two numbers in here, and then we're going to add them up for the user. And we're going to display it back to our output element. So I want you to take a second and think about what's happening. So our n1 is the element with an ID of number 1. So it is this element. And n2 is this element. So what's going to happen when I add n1 plus n2? So let's run it. Let's put 1 and 1. And let's see what comes up. So as you can see here, it's probably not what you were thinking. You're probably thinking it was going to come up with 2. But remember, this represents the whole element. But we don't want the whole element. We want the value that's inside the element. So recall for a text input, the value property is the one that represents the information that's inside the text input. So let's try it again. So we'll say 1 plus 1, and hopefully the answer is 2. 11. How did that happen? Okay, so one thing to recall is that information has a certain type. And let me demonstrate this using our console. If I do type of n1, what type of information is being stored here? Now you might say, well, it's a number. But the thing is that a text input always returns a string. It doesn't matter what type of information you put in there. It always returns a string. And when you put a plus sign between two strings, that is a concept called string concatenation. It simply combines them. It doesn't add it. So the plus sign has two meanings. If the two variables were actual numbers, then it would add it. But because they're not, they're strings, as we can see here. I mean, I could do it for n2 as well. It's still a string. Just to further prove to you that what's happening with the plus sign, I'm going to do W plus E. And you can see here, we're getting we. Again, the plus sign is just combining it. So what we have to do is we have to convert this value from a string to a number. So JavaScript has a function called parseInt that will allow us to convert all this information into a number. Now, right now, the line might look a little ugly, but I will tell you with practice, you'll get used to it. And it's just the idea that once you get the information, get the value, you convert it. You convert it to whatever data type you want. So right now, what we're going to do is we're going to convert both numbers into integers. And let's say we finally get our answer of 2. So say 1 plus 1, and we get the answer of 2. And just to show, I could put any number in here. Oops, pressed the wrong button. So let's say 12 plus 3, 15. So now our program's working the way we want it to. But what if I put 12.3? All right, parseInt. Int meaning integer is a whole number. But right now what we've done is we've entered in a decimal number. So what's going to happen? Let me run this one more time because I can't remember if I refresh the page with the new code. So notice it's 15. What parseInt will do is that it will drop the decimal. Because you might think that, okay, let's do 12.8. Maybe it does some kind of rounding. Maybe we'll get the answer of 16. No. parseInt simply drops the decimal part. So how do we handle decimal type numbers? So there's another function called parseFloat. And parseFloat will allow you to handle information that's decimal. So let's say 4.1 plus, 3.4 plus 2.1, 5.5. Okay, so pretty simple, pretty straightforward. So realize that the plus sign has two meanings. When your information is numerical, it'll actually add it. When information is of type string, then it'll combine it, which again, it is a useful feature. In later lessons, we will learn how to build output by using the plus sign. So I want to review some of the other symbols used for arithmetic operations. So going to W3 schools, the plus sign is pretty obvious, as well as the minus sign. Multiplication might be the one if you're not familiar with programming. It's not the X, it is the asterisk, which is above the 8. And this is a nice new one that was added a couple years ago. To do exponents, use 2 asterisks. Again, you'll see examples of this in a future lesson. Division is this forward-leaning slash. And these are some other operators that you may know of or will learn in a future course. We will be exploring this one though, the plus plus and the minus minus when we get to loops. But for right now, I want you to focus on just these because these will allow you to create basic formulas. What's not being represented here, because it's not really an operation, are the parentheses. And that kind of rounds out all the tools you need in order to create formulas. So let's go back to our presentation. So in this lesson, we saw that text inputs return string information regardless of what the information actually is inside the text input. In order for us to work with numerical information, we have to use the parseInt or the parseFloat functions to convert that information from a string to an integer or a float. Float meaning decimal point number. We reviewed the basic operations of addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and exponents. Lastly, the addition symbol, the plus symbol, has dual meaning. When it's between two numbers, it will actually do the addition. When it's between two strings, it does something called string concatenation, which combines things. So we are staged to get ready to go do some more sophisticated things. Enjoy.